Hello, Canucks fans, and welcome back to another episode of Canucks Conversation, which is brought to you by our friends over at Greta. I say it every time, it's the home of our electric watch parties, and it was our off-season chill spot. We're no longer in the off-season. Young Stars starts tomorrow, and training camp starts the week after that. Less than a week till training camp starts. So, very excited. Greta is going to be our spot to chill all season long, and the spot, like I said, of our watch parties, which you will not want to miss. Harman Dial joins me. My name is David Guidrelli. This is Canucks Conversation, and you're back from New York. How was New York?
It was amazing. It's one of my favorite cities in North America to visit. The food's always immaculate there. It was really cool. The reason we were out there is because the New York Times was hosting a one-day summit for all the NHL writers. So we got to tour the massive New York Times building and office space, have our meetings there, and um, hang out with our colleagues. And literally on the day before I left, also ran into the rapper Tyga just on the streets, which was super funny. Those are the experiences and little stories you'll only ever experience in New York.
You could show me 5 photos of different rappers, and I would not be able to spot Tyga. Like if I saw Tyga on the street, I'd be like, I don't know who that is. I would not know. I don't know what he looks like. But I saw your Instagram story there. That's awesome. Getting to meet someone. Who's the most famous person you've ever met?
Ooh, that's a good question. Obviously,
How
outside
about
of
we'll split it. We'll go met and seen, like
Met,
seen in person.
probably Dave Chappelle, which was also in New
Ooh.
York 2 years
Oh,
ago.
that's right. I forgot your Chappelle story. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, again, that day, it was literally a random like drop-in comedy show. It wasn't, oh, like I'm going to Dave Chappelle show, but it ended up being him and Chris Rock for like an hour and a half in a bar with like 50 people.
Dude, that's the coolest thing. Like I'm a real big fan of stand-up comedy, and just hearing them talk about, yeah, this guy was at this club that night. Like that's where they go do their new stuff, right? Like before you see a special, they're going out on the road and they're testing a lot of their stuff. So even those guys who are, super well known, they're still going to like the local bars and the local comedy clubs to test out their stuff. So I just find that super interesting, and that's awesome that you got to see Chappelle. I'm trying to think who mine would be, and you said obviously not including athletes. I don't know why I can't think of anything off the top of my head other than maybe like Michael Bublé. But at this point, he kind of counts as an athlete because he's always with the Canucks.
Yeah, he's basically affiliated with the team now.
Yeah, I don't know who else it would be for me.
I'm going to give an athlete, but not a hockey player.
Okay.
I've met Alphonso Davies after he went to Bayern. So I'm not talking about like 17-year-old Alphonso with the Whitecaps. Like he was already at Bayern when I met him. So I'm gonna stand by that. One of the probably already the greatest Canadian soccer player ever.
I don't know. I don't know who it would be for me. Anyways,
I have a really good story to tell you after the show. Not someone I met, but like kind of similar. I'll tell you after the show.
Is it an anyone else story or an off-air story?
I could be in an anyone else story. It's nothing bad.
Perfect.
Remind me of anyone else. I'll bring it up.
Chat, remind him on anyone else, because I'm for sure going to forget, because we've got a very busy show of Canucks Conversation. We're going to kick it off with another edition of Canucks Convo Family Feud. We are 2-3 on the year. We'll see what happens today, but we might have to use training camp and restart our record once the regular season starts. I don't know. We'll see.
It's preseason, right?
Yeah,
if we're below 500, we're just going to write that off as preseason.
Yep, we just wipe it clean off the slate. Let's get to Family Feud. Jacob, take it away.
I'm your man, Jacob Lazar, and it's time for another edition of Canucks Combo Family Feud. And Karen pointed out in the chat here, and I just got to correct myself. Yes, greatest men's soccer player ever. Christine Sinclair, very clearly the greatest Canadian soccer player ever, and probably the best women's player of all time. So yes, got to correct myself there before we get started. All right, now we're in for Canucks Combo Family Feud. I think Quads has switched out his headphones. I don't think he can hear us right now. His microphone is muted. So Harman, going first. You've been the horse on this, throughout the whole time we've been doing it. I think you've outscored Quads 5 out of 5 times. I like your chances of doing it again here. Harman, are you ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Quick refresher of the rules. You're going to have 25 seconds. If you don't know an answer, you can just say pass. We'll come back to it at the end.
Cool.
All right. Sorry, just resetting your timer here. Timer will begin when I finish reading the first question. And actually, I need to give you a little bit of additional information for this first question. For this answer, you have to give me upper bowl followed by location, lower bowl followed by location. Which is
what?
It'll make sense when you hear it.
All
Yeah.
right.
But you'll have to specify either upper bowl or lower bowl.
Okay.
And yeah, it'll make sense as soon as you hear the question. Which is the best seating area to watch a hockey game live?
Lower bowl, Canucks side.
Sure. Name an AHL team that is not the Abbotsford Canucks.
Ontario Reign.
Name another NHL team with blue uniforms.
St. Louis Blues.
Name the most underrated goalie in Canucks history.
Ooh, Jacob Markstrom.
Name the best hockey movie of all time. I'll let you answer because I was a little slow there.
Sorry, what was that?
Best hockey movie of all time.
Slapshot.
All right. Good work. You can let Quads know to come back in. I'm going to tally up your score and we'll get him all set up.
How'd you do?
I don't know. I'll be honest. I don't know. I definitely I basically don't even think I fully understood the first question.
Okay.
Or like gave.
You understood it well enough. I'm going to give you an answer for that. Yeah.
What the hell? Do I get any sort of like explanation on that, or am I just gonna have to dive into it too?
You're just gonna have to dive in, Quads. I just need like 10 seconds here to tally these up.
Yeah, take your time. Take your time.
And then we'll swing on back.
Jacob did say it was gonna be easy, Harman. So we'll see, because he's clowning on us a little bit if we lose today. Because he said right here in the chat, he said today's Family Feud is an easier one. You can't blame me if the guys lose. Do you agree with that?
I mean, they're fine. Like, I wouldn't say it's harder or easier than most of the ones we've done. I call it a roughly average difficulty relative to the other ones we've had so far.
Okay. Cool. I'm excited.
I'm curious to see, because I genuinely have no idea if I did well, if I bombed.
We'll see. Captain Canuck in the chat said, it's been a hot minute since I've watched. What the hell is going on here? Yeah, so Captain Canuck, during the summer, we debuted this segment. Every Thursday, we're going to play Family Feud all throughout the year. You can vote, or not vote. You can fill out our survey in the description of episodes. There's one in this episode, just so everybody knows. If you're listening on podcast, you can find it in the description. If you're listening on YouTube, you can find it in the description for next week's survey. We're going to do it on Thursday. And just as we wait for Jacob here, I should also go over our training camp schedule real quick here. Our next show is going to be on Wednesday, when Harman and I both drive up to Penticton. Well, you're going to be in my car with Jeff. Me, you, and JPAT are making the road trip to Penticton. Jim Rutherford and Patrick Alvin are going to speak on Wednesday, so we're going to have a show reacting to what they say. That'll come out probably Wednesday evening, afternoon, late afternoon, not exactly sure when, but we will have a show on Wednesday. We'll have a show on Thursday after the first day of on-ice sessions at Canucks training camp. And then from there, we'll basically do what we do every year, and that's basically do a show every single day. Kind of finishing off with the Canucks having a scrimmage on Sunday, and then the week after that we'll probably take a day or two to kind of recover, and then we'll be back at it certainly on Tuesday the week following training camp. But that's our schedule, so make sure you hit that notification bell if you're on YouTube, and on podcast make sure you have those downloads automatic so that you never miss an episode. All right, Jacob, tell me the damage.
So Harman once again got you off to a very, very good start. He got 105 points for you.
Okay.
And there's some number one answers still available. So Quads, if you clutch up here, you should do just fine.
Okay, let's do it.
All right, we're going to add your 30 seconds to the stage. I'm going to remind you again of the rules. You're going to have 30 seconds on the clock. The time will begin when I finish reading the first question. If you don't know an answer, you can say pass. We'll come back to it at the end. If you give an answer that Harman already gave, you'll hear the buzzer, and you'll have to give me a new answer. Quads, are you ready?
Yes.
All right, I have to give you the same little tidbit I gave Harman before here. For this first question, you have to give me upper bowl followed by a location, or lower bowl followed by a location. It'll make sense as soon as you hear the question.
Okay.
Which is the best seating area to watch a hockey game live?
Lower bowl, center ice.
Try again.
Upper Bowl center ice.
Name an AHL team that is not the Abbotsford Canucks.
Oh, Colorado Eagles.
Wow, that's a tough one. Name another NHL team with blue uniforms.
St. Louis.
Try again.
Are you kidding me? Kraken.
Name the most underrated goalie in Canucks history.
Ryan Miller.
Oh, sorry. No, Miller's good. Jumped on that. I'm gonna read the question here because I screwed you over. Name the best hockey movie of all time.
Miracle.
Nice. Good job. All right. I'm gonna tally this up.
I don't feel good about that at all.
I'm gonna tell you guys right now. I still think you guys won, but you guys botched that AHL one.
What did you say?
He said the Ontario Reign. You guys combined for 1 point on that question.
Well, that's a crazy question. There's like 30, and I don't know. Like Bakersfield, I guess, is probably going to be the number one.
Marlies, maybe.
Marlies. Who gives a crap about the Marlies? But anyways, okay. Let's see what we ended up with.
I'm just on this right now. You said.
I'm glad you got Miller for underrated goalie. I did not know what to say and just said Markstrom.
I think that's a fine answer. Like, I think that'll be a top 3 answer.
Oh, you fell just short,
no
guys.
Way. Okay.
You got to 191.
Okay, walk us through it.
Yeah.
Where did we go wrong?
So the big one that you missed was in the best hockey movie of all time. You got Slapshot was Harman's answer. That was number 1. Miracle was number 3. You missed out on 35 points for number 2 with Mighty Ducks. If you guys had pulled Mighty Ducks, Harman with Slapshot got 40. So that was the big one. But if you had pulled Mighty Ducks, that would have done it.
Damn it.
For underrated goalie, Ryan Miller was the number 1 answer. Harm, you said Markstrom, who was actually my choice when I voted in the poll. But the number 2 answer was actually Dan Cloutier with 14 points. Yeah, Markstrom only 4 responses, also, and one of them was mine. So
Jacob, pause what you're doing for a sec, because I also have to say this. When we did our Mount Rushmore of goalies, there was a few people that were like, oh, it has to be Dan Cloutier over like Thatcher Demko, who we were putting on there. Because obviously the Mount Rushmore, for those that didn't listen, was Roberto Luongo, Kirk and Clay, and Richard Berter. And then our 4th, we were like, yeah, it's probably Thatcher Demko, maybe Jacob Markstrom. People were like, oh, it's Dan Cloutier. Those teams should have done a lot more, and they would have done a lot more. Like I was 4 years old, and I can tell you that those teams could have done a lot more if they had a better goaltender. So don't give me this Dan Cloutier stuff. Not to do Dan Cloutier slander on me in here. No offense to Dan Cloutier, but come on. Most underrated of all time. Mount Rushmore. What are we talking about here? Anyways, continue, Jacob.
Eddie Lack, Corey Schneider tied for 3rd on that poll. So, I mean, Harm, if you had said like Schneider over Markstrom, you would have done it. Actually, yeah, you would have. If you had said Schneider over Markstrom, you would have gotten 200 even. But I said Markstrom as well. That was a little surprising that he was so low.
I thought Markstrom. It's fine. Good answer, Harm.
A team with blue jerseys. You got the number 2 answer with St. Louis Blues, Harman. The Kraken was the number 6 answer, Quads. If you had said Lightning, Rangers, or Leafs. Yeah. The Leafs were the number 1 with 32 points. That was a big number 1 you guys missed out on. That again would have done it. You did get the number 1 and number 2 for the first question. That was a tough one. Harman said like lower bowl Canucks side. I gave him center ice for that. And then you said upper bowl center ice. Quads. And those were the number 1 and 2 answers.
Right on.
There was a few in there that like to sit behind the net. I don't really know why, but I guess they like to watch a game like they're playing NHL 24. And finally, an AHL team that is not the Abbotsford Canucks. You guys combined for a single point with Ontario Reign. Nobody said the Colorado Eagles other than David Quadrelli. Some of the top answers, the Manitoba Moose and Utica Comets, 2 former Canucks affiliates. And the number 1 answer was the Toronto Marlies with 19. So, and then the Calgary Wranglers and Bakersfield Condors both made it in, as did the 2-time defending champion Hershey Bears. So that was a tough one. You guys got to 191.
I don't know. I didn't. That was a good survey. That was a good survey.
That was winnable.
That's all. I feel like that was the right difficulty. You guys just slipped up on 2 of the questions.
Yep. It's hard. It is hard. Like it's harder than I thought it was going to be when I came up with the segment idea.
The questions also take up a lot of time, like just listening to the questions.
Well, and that's why I'm going to be a little generous with giving you some extra time at the end there. But yeah, it's It's tough. I mean, we're gonna have Jeff with you guys up in Penticton. Maybe we'll bring him in, see how he
Tag
does
team.
on a
Yeah.
little guest appearance. I know big family feud guy is Jeff Patterson, and we'll
Could
see how
we
he does.
could we theoretically be like, okay, you need 250 points and all three of us get to go?
Yeah, you know what? I could do that. I'd have to pull
I think
some
we'll do it.
unused questions. Maybe have to go up to 6 questions for it, but or we'll see. I can find a way to make the math work, but yeah,
We'll leave that to you. You're our
Yeah.
math guy, Jacob. All right, that was fun. Thank you for that. That was good. 2-4 on the preseason. Officially, this is the preseason. We're wiping the slate clean.
Yeah.
This is us warming up for the year. So, slate's clean. Slate's clean for the Vancouver Canucks as well, Harm. They enter training camp. They have 2 goalies that looks like they're going to be starting training camp with. So with that, let's get into our poll question, which is brought to you by Mr. Lube. I came up with this one because I want to talk about the goaltending situation today. So our poll question today, will the Canucks sign a goaltender to a contract or a PTO, either one, before training camp? 71.4% of voters say yes, 28.6% say no. Harm, I'll take the lead on this one because I think yes as well. I voted yes here. I think it's either going to be Antti Raanta or Kevin Lankinen. 2 Finnish guys. Marco Terenius, of course, has worked with both of these players. You want that added spirit of competition. Antti Raanta already has a relationship with Rick Tocchet from their Arizona days. Raanta on a PTO certainly doesn't hurt. It's a fine plan B, but make no mistake about it. Plan A is Kevin Lankinen, who's a legitimately great NHL backup. And we're going to talk about him a lot on today's show. But I'm voting yes on this one.
Yeah, and I'm also curious, how much incentive do you think there could be even to bring in a guy on a PTO just for the sake of making numbers easier for training camp and making sure that each training camp group has goalies to NHL caliber or pro caliber goalies to shoot on?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a factor. I think the more goalies, the better for training camp. Like, you're going to have Tolopilo, you're going to have Patera, and you're going to have Seelovs. But again, you only have those 3, which, to your point, like, you want a 4th. And I mean, who's after that? Jonathan Lemieux, like Ty Young would probably be there as well. But those are the guys that you're sending to young stars. So ideally, like you said, pro caliber guys, you can bring in a guy like Antti Raanta on a PTO. And we're going to talk about Lankinen a lot, so let's get to that. But I will say, remind everybody that this poll question was brought to you by Mr. Lube. Mr. Lube and Tires Change Your Oil, Change Your Wipers event is on now. Visit MrLube.com to download your coupon for a free pair of Goodyear hybrid wiper blades with any oil change for a limited time at Mr. Lube. Find them at one of their 18 locations in the Lower Mainland. Tell you what, Harm, got a big drive up to Penticton coming up next Wednesday. I've never done the drive before. I've never done the Coquihalla Highway. Never done it before. So
You've never driven the Coquihalla before?
No, never. I've only driven to a Soyuz. So I take the 3, right? I take the Crow's Nest.
Wow. It's crazy. And you've lived here your whole life and you've never driven the Coke.
Well, I've only been driving for like 6 years, Jacob.
You okay, have you been a passenger going up the Coquihalla?
I think so, but when I'm a passenger, not when I'm driving, Harman, don't worry. I'm a big sleep in the car guy when I'm a passenger. So much so that Rob Williams from Daily Hive has a story. He'll have a story for you of when training camp was in Abbotsford. We carpooled and he drove me back to Coquitlam and I slept for most of that ride. That's like an hour drive. And I think I was asleep before we even hit the highway from the Abbotsford Center. And I slept the whole thing. So, yeah, I'm a big sleeping in the car guy when I'm a passenger. So I don't even know if I've been a passenger on the Coquihalla. I'm really not sure.
That's funny. I haven't driven it either, but I've been a passenger because I also take the Crow's Nest usually.
I like the Crow's Nest. I will tell you, the thing I learned about the Crow's Nest is those signs telling you to slow down for turns. Those things aren't just for show. Those are like the turn speeds that you need to be going to not like flip on those turns. So hey man, I'm a good driver, as you know, but I take it seriously. Though I don't speed when I'm turning. We're gonna be safe. We're gonna be safe.
Clarified the when I'm turning.
So, yeah, well, dude, straight road, I'm gunning it. No.
Then you're gonna love the Coquihalla.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. We'll see if Jeff Patterson likes the Coquihalla. He said he's gonna write a review about my driving if there's any issues along the way.
I feel like I feel I would not want JPAT as like if I was driving and I'm trying to get my license as an ICBC, like he's my examiner. I feel like JPAT would be on the ball with everything.
I have no reason to believe this, but I'm gonna bet that Jeff Patterson's not the best passenger. Like I bet he's a nervous passenger. I have no reason to believe that, other than I'm just completely
I could
guessing.
see
We'll
it.
see. Well, I can see it too, right? Like we'll see. I think he's watching the show, so he'll text me and correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, we're gonna find out on Wednesday, but I'm a good driver. I'm a good driver. But anyways, Coca-Cola coming up next Wednesday. We'll see how that goes, and we'll talk about it on Wednesday. On Wednesday's show, we'll talk about how that drive went. But we're going to talk about that because Canucks training camp is officially a week away today. Jeff joined me on Tuesday's episode, Harman, while you were away, and we already talked about like Thatcher Demko, Brock Besser, Elias Pettersson. We even talked about like the fringes of the roster with, guys like Jonathan Lekarmaki, Max Tasson, Atu Ratu, Cole McWard. We talked about those guys. We should also mention that there was a report courtesy of Ben Kuzma of the province that Cole McWard is out with a minor nagging injury, and that's why they didn't send him to Young Stars. He's expected to be ready to go for training camp, but they didn't send him to Young Stars for that reason. So as we continue our training camp preview here on Canucks Conversation, Harm, I thought it was appropriate that we talked about defense and goaltending. Let's start on the defense because I know that's something that you want to talk about. And of course, there's going to be some jobs up for grabs here.
Yeah, the last couple of training camps, the Canucks have taken the opportunity to run some experiments with how they want to deploy their blue line, and ultimately, it hasn't necessarily been like what we see at the start of training camp. Hasn't been what we see game one of the regular season, but it has been an opportunity to try something different. Like 2 years ago in Whistler, the Canucks were experimenting with Quinn Hughes on the right side because that right side was shallow. They had a little bit more talent on the left side. And it was the story for the first couple of days of camp of how does Quinn look on the right side? Could that be something that sticks? Ultimately, it didn't, but it was something that was really interesting to kind of track and monitor. And then last year as well, the storyline of how are they going to construct the D pairs. And I actually went back and looked at the start of training camps D pairs. It was Cole Hronik, Hughes Juleson, and Susie McWard, and I think it was Brees Myers. But what I found interesting there, and just even thinking back to camp, was when it opened, most of us didn't think that Hughes and Hronik were going to end up playing together, because it wasn't just that Cole and Hronik ended up playing and sticking together. It's that even after Juleson, it was Susie that got a turn to play with Hughes on the right side. Then McWard got an extended look even through preseason games. It wasn't until pretty late in the process that Hughes and Hronik got an opportunity together. And I think that context is interesting in light of looking ahead at the defensemen they have this season and the lack of puck movers ultimately, right? And the debate of Hughes and Hronik together are so dominant. They're elite together, but does that leave the second and third pair potentially vulnerable from a puck moving standpoint if you've got your two best transporters, your two best skaters on the same defense pair, and could you see some experimentation there? So that's what I'm going to be really interested to see at training camp.
And not to mention that we've heard Rick Tocchet, like I think it was an interview with your colleague Thomas Drance over at The Athletic, Rick Tocchet saying pretty openly that he'd like to have Hughes and Hronik split up. That context of last season training camp is so interesting, Harm, because to me, that just screamed that the Canucks coaching staff was like, okay, well, we know Quinn Hughes and Philip Hronik are going to be able to play together, but let's see if we can do something else. And then ultimately they decided that it was going to be Hughes and Hronik, and that worked out great. So going into this season, now you've seen a full season of Hughes and Hronik, and now you for sure know that can work. So now do you go into it and say, okay, now we're going to basically do the exact same thing because we know if nothing else works out that we can just go to this in the end. So it's going to be an interesting thing to watch when it comes to the Canucks top defense pair. Who do you expect to get a look like with each guy? Because obviously Ian Cole ain't here anymore. So are you thinking it's going to be like a Carson Soucy, Philip Hronik second pair, and then who plays with Hughes? Are you thinking it's going to be Desharnais on day one of camp?
Yeah, if you're thinking about crafting like plan B, plan C scenarios and trying to see what might work, yeah, I'd expect Soucy and Hronik. I think that would be a really intriguing second pair, because I look at Soucy and go, he has the reach, he has the positional intelligence to excel as a defensive defender on a second pair, but for that second pair to take the next step instead of a Tyler Myers, it'd be great if he had a more dynamic puck mover who could handle defensive zone retrievals, zone exits, who could bring some offensive punch. Because again, in the playoffs, when Quinn Hughes was on the bench at 5-on-5, the Canucks were historically bad at generating 5-on-5 shots. So that's an area where you want to have alternative options to turn to. And then as far as who might get an opportunity with Hughes, if they go with Susie and Hronik together, I'd expect Desharnais to get an opportunity. I'd also expect Cole McWard to potentially get a chance. I mean, McWard got an opportunity until, even some of those late preseason games against Edmonton, to where, like, sure, if a guy gets an opportunity in a certain lineup spot at the start of camp, it isn't always indicative of, hey, this is a legit, serious option, right? Because we saw, for example, Vasily Podkolzin with Brock Besser and JT Miller to start camp. He obviously didn't last there very long, but McWard lasted with Hughes once he, got the initial shot after they tried Susie and the other names escaping me. But he got an opportunity late in the process, and I think they were really seriously considering it. So Desharnais and McWard are a couple of the guys that I'd be looking at. And just in general with McWard, he's going to be intriguing in general because when we talk about, okay, they've got a lot of size in their bottom four, they've got a lot of defensive ability, could they use a little bit more quickness? McWard isn't a natural puck mover, but his skating is better than some of those bottom four guys. So could he take another step, considering he's still pretty young, and just emerge in that conversation of whether it's a number 7 defense job, a number 8 defense job, make force the coaching staff's hand and force them into a tough decision.
Yeah, and it's something that I'm kind of looking at right now. I wrote something on Canucks Army about this. It's going to go up tomorrow morning, but I'm basically finished it. And I was just looking at, like, how many jobs are really up for grabs? And the answer is basically not many, aside from the one, like, there's not many roster spots up for grabs. Like, it feels pretty safe that, like, we know who's going to be on the roster, right down to Nils Amon and Phil DiGiuseppe being the final forwards. There might be like one, I don't even want to say or two. There might be one surprise when it comes to the final roster, but like, Noah Juulsen's going to be your 7th defenseman. I don't see a guy like Cole McWard, jumping over. Really what it is as soon as there's an injury, we basically know who the next call-up is. Like, if you lose center, it's going to be Max Sasson or it's going to be Aatu Ratu. You lose a winger, it's going to be Arshdeep Bains or it's going to be Aatu Ratu. Can you put Lekkerimaki in that conversation? Again, I still think we need to see more. We need to see what he looks like at training camp, how they deploy him at training camp through the preseason before I'm comfortable saying, oh yeah, first call up is going to be Lekkerimaki, because it might be a situation where, like, okay, if this is just going to be a short-term thing and you're just going to be bouncing between the press box and the fourth line, let's leave Jonathan Lekkerimaki down in the minors. I think that's how they should go about it personally. But again, it depends how his season looks. Don't forget Linus Karlsson as well, in terms of who might be a call-up option. So it's interesting as we head into training camp here, because there's no real roster jobs available, but there's tons of spots in the lineups. And I mean, let's look at those. Like, let's look at what's available. Jeff wrote it today for CA. Questions going into training camp: who's going to skate with Hughes? We've just talked about that one. Another one: who's going to be the bottom 6 centers? Like, in what order do Teddy Bluger and Pius Suter skate? Who is skating with Connor Garland and Dakota Joshua? I feel like it's pretty safe to assume that those two will be together. Is it Elias Pettersson? Is it Elias Pettersson that gets a look with Garland and Joshua? I don't think so right off the top. Like, I think day one of training camp, I would like to see Garland, Joshua, and Pius Suter as their pivot. That's what I'd like to see on day one of training camp, but it could be Teddy Bluger. It certainly could be Teddy Bluger. So that's one thing that I'm really curious about. You got a favorite? You got a front runner when we look at that one?
It should be Pius Suter, right? And I know a lot of people will bring up, well, Bluger had the chemistry, he's a proven option there, but I look at Suter as an upgraded version of him in terms of the finishing side and just having a tad more of an offensive touch. And again, I go to the small sample that they had in around about November, I want to say, before Suter got hurt. Suter, Joshua, Garland as a line at 5-on-5. They outshot opponents 40-18. They controlled 70% of high danger chances, and they outscored opponents 3-0. Like, they were dummying other teams, dominating to the same extent, if not better, as Bluger, Joshua, and Garland. So it's not as if I'm purely looking at Suter and Bluger and saying, well, theoretically it should work. No, we've seen it work. It's just that it wasn't as large of a sample as it was with Teddy Bluger.
Also, someone in the chat pointed this out as well. Don't forget Sammy Blais. Like, Sammy Blais here on a PTO. I don't know if it's a situation like we're seeing out in Toronto with Max Pacioretty, where it just looks like there's a handshake agreement to have a contract. Like, my indication is that Sammy Blais is going to be trying to earn a roster spot, and I think he's going to be able to. Again,
Out of camp?
Out of camp? Yes, like a contract. Yeah, you don't think he'll
contract? Yeah, I think it'll be really difficult for him to actually crack the 23-man roster, though.
You think so? Hey, like you
Yeah.
don't think Sammy Blais with a strong camp could outplay like Nils Amon?
Well, the problem is, I think they view Amon pretty highly. I mean, look at the way that they signed him to that like multi-year extension, so that in case they have to, send him down to waivers, they wanted to make that contract as like make teams think twice, because there's a lot of one-way money left on that deal of, hey, do we want to claim this guy? And just he's a center, right? He's a bigger guy. He's an above average penalty killer. He's not a sexy, exciting option, but he's also young enough that he could still develop, improve his faceoffs. And if he becomes a player that's able to become even a 50% faceoff winner, all of a sudden that guy has, I think, more value than Blais potentially, because how many centermen are there that are defensively responsible, can win draws, and are above average size, even if he's not the most physical guy? And then we know Phil Di Giuseppe, Rick Tocchet has always sort of had a soft spot for him. He's a low maintenance guy who knows the system, is defensively responsible, and PDG is like Trance and I always joke, he is the guy that has a strong training camp every single season. Like going back to when Travis Green was the head coach and PDG was cut, every Canucks media member thought that PDG should have made the team just because he dominates training camp every year.
Yeah. Kills penalties, right? Like you said, it's a safe option. The Nils Amon thing is interesting because I think that's who Sammy Blais is looking at. As if he earns a roster spot, it's going to be Nils Amon that gets bumped, right?
Probably.
Curious what it means for the lineup, though, and nobody wants to hear it, but Nils Höglander has to have a big camp, right? Like, where's Nils Höglander on day one? Where is he at the end of camp? Where is he in the opening night lineup? I'm curious. I'm really curious. I don't think he's going to be in the top six. I think he's going to start the year like he did last year as a bottom six guy that needs to go produce a ton in bottom 6 minutes. Don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. The Canucks have a way better bottom six than they did heading into this season than they did this time last year. So there's a lot of different questions that I have heading into training camp. But again, does Sammy Blais have the inside track? No. Could he earn a spot? Yeah, like that's what he's here to do, right? Is earn that contract. We'll see what it ends up being for Sammy Blais, but I'm curious with him coming in on a PTO. Anything else that you wanted to get to specifically about training camp? Defense was what we wanted to talk about. The battles heading in training camp. Anything else that stands out to you? Obviously, we know there's going to be that one about who plays with Elias Pettersson, who plays with JT Miller and Brock Besser. Those are going to be interesting ones. I feel like we've talked about them and we're going to talk about them. I feel like there's nothing new to really say about any of that. I feel like we've given our takes on that. Daniel Sprong seems like the guy that's going to be trying to earn one of those spots, but again, might be a guy that starts the year in the bottom six and has to produce in more limited minutes. Anything else that you wanted to get to before we get to goaltending?
Yeah, I know we talked a lot about like who might play with Hughes and what experiments might they kind of run there, but again, what we see at the start of camp isn't necessarily plan A. And if we're thinking about, like, let's say the Canucks are playing their season opener tomorrow, how would you construct the D pairs? You probably would go Hughes, Hronek, Susie Myers, and Forbort Desharnais. And from that standpoint, this is maybe not so much a training camp question as it is like a regular season question, and how do these two players sort of fit together? But Forbort and Desharnais playing together, would they be too slow and limited with the puck together? Because Desharnais was really effective on Edmonton's third pair last season, but he was partnered primarily with Brett Kulak, who's smooth skating, who's pretty skilled with the puck, can transition it. So Desharnais didn't have to really handle the load at all on breakouts. And now you give him Derek Forbort, who, like, Derek Forbort I think compared to Ian Cole at half the price, I like him as a
3.1.
budget Ian Cole replacement. But the
Yep.
one area where Forbort isn't going to be as good as Ian Cole is like poised with the puck and puck skills, because Cole, even though he was slow, would typically make the right decisions with the puck. And I know he struggled in the playoffs. He's obviously hurt, but I'm talking the totality of his regular season in round one against Nashville. He's poised, patient, sees the ice pretty well. I don't know if Forbort has that skill set. So how would those two work together as a potential deeper Forbort in Desharnais? I also will point out, I was doing a radio hit in Edmonton with Low Tide, and he brought up how Desharnais is interesting in the sense that he's slow, but sometimes he'll look like he's getting beat, but his reach is so long that he just still finds a way to kill the play with a stick. So maybe that's something that, and I know that's more of a defensive side of things, doesn't really address the puck moving side of it. But that I thought was an interesting point. Like, yeah, we know he's 6'7". You figure that he's gonna have a long reach, but to know that it's not just that he has the long reach, but he knows how to actually use it to kill plays and how that can help compensate for his lack of foot speed. I thought that was an interesting observation from, obviously an Oilers writer who followed him really, really closely.
Okay, good stuff. Let's get to goaltending. I have a lot here. I have a lot to talk about, and we talked about it in our poll question, but I want to specifically talk about Kevin Lankinen. I really want to talk about Kevin Lankinen. Again, this guy is coming off a $2 million contract with the Nashville Predators, where he served as the backup to UC Saros. He's a legitimately good backup. I have him as like a top 5 backup in the NHL, and he remains unsigned. Training camps are next week, and I'm just really starting to wonder if this is just a Daniel Sprong situation where him and his agent maybe thought the interest would be higher heading into July 1st. So like Sprong, Lankinen could be looking for a great situation where he can prove himself to the entire league, before hitting the market again. Is it a 1-year deal? Is it a 2-year deal? I don't know. We do know, courtesy of our pal Rick Dollywall, that the Canucks have made an offer to Kevin Lankinen, but that it was too low. What's too low? Like, I'm trying to figure out the situations around the league where Kevin Lankinen and his agent might be looking at it and saying, this is where we're going to sign. This is a good situation for us, and B, gets us the money that we feel we deserve. So I looked around at all of the goalie situations, all the goalie tandems heading into this season around the National Hockey League, trying to identify where the scenario and where the fit was for Lankinen. I have it down to 6 teams, and 3 of these teams, in my view, are long shots. I'll go with the long shots first. I have Buffalo, where they have Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen and Devin Levi. They want at least one, if not both of those young goaltenders to work out, but maybe they feel like, hey, we have 2 young goaltenders. One of them's going to have to go start in the AHL. Obviously, I'm talking about Devin Levi here. It looks like UPL is going to be the guy out in Buffalo. So maybe they want Devin Levi to get some more AHL experience. So they bring in a guy like Kevin Lankinen,
Don't they have
who at that point...
Sorry, I was going to, sorry to jump in. I was going to say, don't they have Reimer as well?
James Reimer?
Yeah.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is maybe they want a good backup to put pressure on him, right? Like, James Reimer, I'm sorry. No, I guess that is disrespectful to James Reimer, but I really have no problem saying it. James Reimer's washed at this point. I don't look at James Reimer and say, yeah, that means they can't go get Kevin Lankinen. Again, I'm calling these the long shots for a reason, but James Reimer is not the reason that I'm calling it a long shot in Buffalo. Like, I don't think anybody is sitting in Buffalo and saying, yeah, we'd like Kevin Lankinen and we can bring him in on this number, and someone's putting their hand up and saying, well, we have James Reimer. I don't think that's happening. I really don't. I don't think that's the reason that they wouldn't be interested in Kevin Lankinen. I think it's more that they have 2 young goaltenders, one of, if not both, that they're hoping can take a major step this year. Again, James Reimer is the plan C for Buffalo right now, but they could make it a more solid plan B if they bring in Kevin Lankinen. And again, though, I don't think they're going to do it. So moving on here with, the Calgary Flames is another one. Dustin Wolf and Dan Vladar. You want Dustin Wolf to take that step. You want Dustin Wolf to be a starter. It's a down season in Calgary. So for me, this doesn't make much sense for the team, and it also doesn't make much sense for Kevin Lankinen, because the Calgary Flames aren't going to be a very good team this year. So if you're Kevin Lankinen, again, you're looking for a situation where you are able to prove your worth to the rest of the league. So Calgary doesn't really make much sense. Edmonton, I looked at Stuart Skinner and Calvin Pickard. That'd be a good situation, I think, for Kevin Lankinen. Do the Oilers want to do it? I think they should. Like, I think that's one of the long shots. That's the closest one to one making sense for both player and team. I don't think the Oilers should feel comfortable rolling into the season with Stuart Skinner and Calvin Pickard. Although I did message Bag Milk, and he said they seem to feel comfortable with Calvin Pickard as their backup. I look at that if I'm Lankinen and say there's a really good opportunity for me to not just be a backup, but to be a 1B, which again, I really think this is going to play a factor in this is what's the situation, because you were UC Saros' backup. You were a great backup, but what did that do for you on the free agent market? The answer was not very much. So I don't know about Edmonton, but among those long shots, I have them as the big one in the long shots, but I have two big ones. The first one, as like the favorites in my view, the Flyers. I almost called them the Phillies, but the Philadelphia Flyers, their goaltending situation is a mess. They're going to be trying to compete. They were on the doorstep of playoff contention last year. They have a guy on a PTO, which we'll see where that goes. But again, like you're really looking at Sam Ersson and Ivan Fedotov, and there's that other guy that was just linked in a trade rumor. Do you know who I'm talking about, Harm?
I don't know.
Someone tweeted it. Sarah Volley retweeted. I'm going to find it right now because he was said to the Calgary Flames being interested in going after him. I need to find his name. Yeah, hold on. Alexei Kolosov is the goaltender. So if they're looking at trading goaltender Alexei Kolosov, there are a handful of teams who would have interest. Two teams I'd expect are Calgary and Nashville. That from Anthony DeMarco, and it got retweeted by Frank Cervelli. Anthony DeMarco, I should say, new employee over at Daily Faceoff. So welcome to the Nation Network to Anthony, who got the scoop and tweeted it out. So anyways, the Flyers, honestly, like I look at the Flyers and say that's probably the best situation for both player and team when it comes to Kevin Lankinen. But after that, the other favorite I have, other than the Canucks, is the LA Kings. Darcy Kemper, David Rittich. How do you feel about that? I would not feel very great about that if I were the LA Kings. So those are the two. Those are the big two that stand out. But ultimately, do the Canucks, aside from maybe the Flyers, have the best situation to offer to Kevin Lankinen? Again, like I've said from the start, a lot of it depends on Demko's health. But I am thinking at this stage, if the Flyers don't come calling and the Kings don't come calling, and especially the Flyers, if the Flyers don't come calling to Kevin Lankinen, at what point do you just say, okay, we're going to take what the Canucks have to offer and make the best of it?
Yeah, it's funny. We didn't even talk, but I also spent some time this morning looking at the same thing you did, goaltending tandems around the NHL and where could there be an opportunity. And really, Philly stood out to me as the prime opportunity because Ersson played 50-ish games last year, but only had an .890 save percentage, and Fedotov only has 3 games of NHL experience. So arguably the worst goaltending tandem in the NHL, relatively inexperienced, and like you said, Philly's probably trying to at least be competitive again this season. And to further your point, even the situations where maybe there's a lack of talent in that, like Buffalo, for example, or LA. I shouldn't even mention Buffalo as a lack of talent because Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen was outstanding last season, especially in the second half. But even those like long shot or secondary options that you pointed out, those teams already have like 3 borderline NHL caliber goaltenders. Like even LA, for example, they've got Copley as their number 3. Like they're 3 deep on NHL caliber goaltenders, even if it's fringe guys. And yeah, Lankinen would represent an upgrade. But when you've already got 3 guys, is a team really going to prioritize bringing a 4th goaltender in? And how is that going to work with your AHL affiliate if you've got prospects down there that you're trying to develop as well? Would the player would Lankinen be interested in that type of opportunity where there is a lot of competition? What might that do for the existing goaltenders that are there and the relationships that you're trying to build? And is that worth potentially pissing some of those goalies off, right? For just bringing in a 4th guy. So yeah, I don't think there are a lot of appealing situations for a player like Lankinen, at least from a 200-foot view. Now, could there be injuries, certain performances in training camp that open up an extra opportunity or two that could be appealing? Maybe, But the longer this drags out, the more I'm thinking that there aren't many appealing destinations, and the more that Vancouver could be attractive, because sure, you may not have as much of a guaranteed opportunity, but the benefit of playing in Vancouver is that you're practically guaranteed an elite defensive environment, which is going to boost your win totals, is going to boost your save percentage, and your numbers are going to look nice, as opposed to, let's say you go to a Philly, maybe you have maybe you have more opportunity there, but that Flyers blue line is not very good at all. And could you get left out to dry, and all of a sudden you're heading into free agency next summer with like an 890 save percentage?
Yeah, exactly. You're not just thinking for this season, you're thinking for next season. So it's going to be interesting. I will say this as we kind of close it out here. I think for sure the Canucks are going to bring in a goaltender. I think they have to. That's my final thing that I wanted to say about training camp, which again kicks off on Thursday. Our next show, again, folks, will be on Wednesday. Jim Rutherford, Patrick Alvine, and Rick Tocchet will speak the day before training camp kicks off. We're going to hopefully have an update, a real update on Thatcher Demko from the horse's mouth. Well, I guess that would be from Demko, from management's mouth. So we'll hear what management has to say about Demko. So we'll give you our reaction to that one. That'll be next Wednesday. So make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel and to the podcast. Fill out that Family Feud survey as well. All right, Harm, let's get to our final anyone else before training camp really kicks off. Let's get to anyone else, which is brought to you by the Vancouver Canadians. The Canadians evened up the Northwest League Championship Series last night and head to Spokane for Game 3 and hopefully just 4 as they play for the title. We want to thank everyone who supported the Seas this year, and a massive shout out from us here at Canucks Convo to the Seas for serving as the presenting sponsor of anyone else. It was a great time every time I got to go out to Nat Bailey this year, as it is every time you get to go out to Nat Bailey Stadium. So major shout out to the Vancouver Canadians. Find them at canadiansbaseball.com. Go Seas. Go get that win in Spokane, which Jeff lose Harm. Harm, can you hear me? Oh, we lost Harman. That's what
I can hear you now.
I don't even know if he's there. All right.
We lost Quads. We lost you.
Sweet.
Actually. Harman was fine, but your internet is not good right now. Your video is about 8 pixels.
Did you hear what I said though about the Canadians?
Yep, we got through the ad read and then cut out right after that.
Oh, yeah, I see that now. All right.
But I think we're back. Your video quality isn't great, but we can hear you, so that's all that matters.
Yeah, good. Harm, I was asking you if you could point out Spokane on a map, like Spokane, Washington. Do you know where it is? Because Jeff had to tell me. I had no clue.
No, I would not know.
It's on the eastern side of Washington. I had no clue. He said it's like by Idaho.
South of Trail.
Yeah, and they have the Boise Hawks. They're in Idaho as well.
I'm a Google Maps guy. Like just driving around, like I'm just gonna punch in Google Maps. I'm not one of those people that like naturally knows geography the best and has a great sense of direction. I'm a slave to Google Maps.
Okay, I don't want to brag, but I do have a great sense of direction for the most part. I can like, I know direction. Like if you like spin me around, I can figure out what's north, all that sort of stuff. Or if I, especially.
Well, okay, hold on. But like, are you talking you can do that without the mountains as well? Like you can.
Yes. Okay. I don't use the mountains. But a lot of it just has to do with like, okay, how did I get here? Like the easiest way. And I always explain this to my mom, who is a, love her to bits, but she has a horrible sense of direction. I always get calls about her being lost in places. So if you turned right to get off Highway 1 and you were heading eastbound, then to get back to Highway 1, you just need to go north. You just need to go back the way you came because you headed south because you turned right. If you turned left, then you were going north off Highway 1. So again, to get back to the highway, you need to go south. So that's the easiest way to explain it to people is which way did you turn to get where you are? Because you basically need to go the opposite direction to get back to the highway that you need to get back on or that you need to get back. Anyways, I have a good sense of direction. And you'll find that when we do the drive to Penticton. I will obviously have Google Maps on, but like, especially that drive, I've never driven the Coquihalla before, but like I could get us to Penticton without Google Maps. There's enough signs, you hit Hope, you have no choice but to end up in Hope. We're going to get our gas and then we're going to hit Penticton. I could do it without Google Maps, but I will tell you, like downtown Vancouver, I do have Google Maps because without it, that's how you end up turning down those stupid one-way streets that you don't
Yeah.
see coming. Yeah. So I do use it downtown all the time. But anyways, let's get some anyone else's. We've got some here. K-Town Chef, have you two left Vancouver ever? Because we were talking about not driving the Coke. I've been to like Kelowna. So to get to Kelowna, you would use the Coke. But like I said, I'm a big sleeping guy. I like to sleep when I'm a passenger on those car rides. So I have left Vancouver before, but to drive, no. The only place I've driven is like, well, I've driven to Seattle. I've driven to a Soyuz, but I just did that drive for the first time literally 3 weeks ago. That was my first time ever doing that drive. So yeah, that's it. That's the only places I've driven is Seattle and a Soyuz outside of Vancouver. Never done anything else.
Yeah, I mean, I travel a lot in general, but most of the time I'm like flying or like taking a ferry or whatever. I have barely driven, like I've driven into the Okanagan, but for example, I haven't even driven down to Seattle.
Mm, it's a
Yeah, I'm just
horrible
not a
drive.
big road trip guy.
Yeah, no, likewise. I also was mad at the Mariners, but the last time I drove to Seattle, it was for the day trip to go watch a Mariners game. I was like, this was basically like 6 hours of driving, and that was like the worst baseball game I've ever seen. That was the day I told you about it. They lost 2-1 to the Los Angeles Angels, who are like a joke of a baseball team. But so are the Mariners at that point. So, anyways, let's go. Let's get going to anyone else. We've got some questions here. This one, I like this from Vin XD, not a Canucks question, but Crosby, my GOAT. Thoughts on the upcoming contract? I just love how nonchalant Sidney Crosby is about it. And everybody's like, oh, what's Crosby going to sign for? Crosby's like, oh, yeah, it'll get done. Like, it is going to get done.
Yeah, probably. I imagine from Crosby's perspective, and again, I don't know anything about the situation, but put yourself in his shoes and think to yourself that, hey, looking at the state of the Penguins moving forward, they're clearly entering, whether you want to call it a retool, a rebuild, they're not going to be in serious contention to win anything uh, over the next few seasons. So if you're Sidney Crosby, the biggest question is how long do you want to keep playing?
Yeah.
Now imagine there's incentive on his part that he'll want to be part of the Olympics in 2026. Going to Milan, he'll probably captain that team. Like that's a strong motivator to play till 2026. But after that, like what is there for him to like Ovechkin has the goals record that he's chasing, but Crosby, like, is there an individual milestone that's really driving him? He's already won his cups. Like the biggest question for him is just how motivated is he to keep playing and for how long is that? Because that's going to determine how long you ultimately want to sign for.
That's the thing, right? Like, he's 37 years old, right? And he's heading into this season. Does he want to sign after that? Like, that's the thing. They're talking about an extension, and Crosby says one's going to get done, but is it just a 1-year deal, right? Like, what are we looking at for Sidney Crosby? I don't know if he's coming to Vancouver, man. I got to be honest.
If he ever did change his mind, and I mean, there'd be a lot of obviously appealing, destinations, most prominently Colorado, of course, because of the McKinnon connection.
Mm.
But if again, I don't think this is ever going to happen, but that Jim Rutherford would just be chomping at the bit to bring Crosby.
And my letters, remember when we talked about
Exactly,
that?
yeah.
My
I'm sure
letters?
that'll sway things. That'll
Dear
win them over.
Dear
So-
Sydney.
So you guys mentioned what he has to play for. I'm actually looking. He's 10th all time in points, just below 1,600. So he's about 260 points away from catching Gordie Howe. So maybe that's it for him, right? And he's only about 100, or sorry, he's about 200 away from Ron Francis for 5th. So you got to figure for him, if he can end up in the top 5 all time in scoring, that's probably something he'd want to accomplish.
And that's the thing, right? Is I just said, I'm like, well, he's 37. Last year, his point total, and I mean his goal total, that was the highest since 2016-17 when the Penguins won the freaking cup. And the point total itself was the highest since the 2018-19 season. So look, if there's a guy who can play into his late 30s, it's probably Sidney Crosby, because I feel like we're going to be having this conversation at this time next year and say, well, he's 38 years old. But again, how many points does Sidney Crosby get this year? I would not bet against another 90-point season for Sidney Crosby.
Yeah, he's going to single-handedly continue trying to drag that team into like a baseline level of competitiveness. Crosby is the only reason the Penguins aren't going to bottom out
Yep.
and be in contention for like a top 5 lottery pick.
Yeah, exactly. It's as simple as that. So we'll see. However long Sidney Crosby wants to play, he will play. However long he wants to play, he's gonna have a contract. He's gonna have interest. And my letters, dear Sydney, I feel like I can call you Sydney because we are so similar. Do you watch It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia?
No, I don't.
Okay, that was a reference to that show. But anyways, let's move on here. We've got some more in the chat here. This one from Hannah. Will we finally get to see Elias Pettersson and Elias Pettersson on the ice together in a preseason game? I was thinking about this, Harm. Yes, the answer is yes, Hannah. We should. We will certainly see them together on the ice at training camp. I mean, maybe they won't be in the same groups, but you'd hope for the content that they do put them in the same group and that these guys are on the ice at the same time. They will be at the same training camp. Elias Pettersson, the defenseman, is getting ready for Young Stars, and then Elias Pettersson, the forward, is obviously getting ready for training camp. But both guys will be in attendance at training camp when it kicks off next Thursday. So that'll be interesting. I think you're going to see some content there. And I'm also saying that because Canucks Army is going to training camp. And I think it's pretty safe to say if we're given the opportunity, we will have some Elias Pettersson and Elias Pettersson content. But I'm thinking the Canucks will be on top of that. But who knows? Maybe not. We'll see.
I don't know if they'll end up in a preseason game together though, just because the DPD is he's obviously not in any type of realistic conversation to make the team. So he'll be, I'd imagine, one of those guys that gets maybe 1 or 2 preseason games really early. And if it's split squad, I don't know if, like, for example, you often don't see like Pettersson, Miller, Besser, a lot of Hughes, a lot of these guys start to ramp up and playing preseason games consistently till the end of preseason when those initial cuts have already been made. And I look at DPD and go, he's probably going to be one of those initial cuts who doesn't get many preseason games. So I don't know if we'll see it actually happen in preseason, but it'd be great for the memes.
It would be so good for the content. And look, they proved it when they drafted this kid that the Canucks do care about the memes. They do, whether you like it or not. The Canucks know. The Canucks know, and they care about the memes. So hopefully we get some Pettersson and Pettersson content. Let's see here. Did we have anything else? Oh, there was one person that was bringing up the idea of splitting up Miller and Besser. I think we've talked about this in the offseason, but a week out of training camp, I just look at it and I say that's one of the only steady things that you have with this team, right? Is the Miller and Besser kind of pairing. The question I have is, one, who's going to play with them? And ultimately, Harm, like, I do think it's going to be Jake DeBrusk. I think ultimately, day one of training camp, Jake DeBrusk is probably going to start with Elias Pettersson. I think day one of camp, it's going to be Jake DeBrusk, Elias Pettersson, Daniel Sprong. But I think in the season, if that line starts to falter a little bit, I think Jake DeBrusk moves up to the top line with JT Miller and Brock Besser. And I think that line turns into a really good line. I think that's the way it's going to go.
Yeah, I mean, DeBrusk stylistically would be a terrific fit with Miller and Besser, but and again, I wouldn't be surprised if that ends up being a line at some point, but then you enter the conversation again of Pettersson having a lack of help on the wings, and who is he going to be left with if the two best wingers by far on this roster are with JT Miller, and at that point it would have to, in my mind, it would have to be, okay, you're bumping up Joshua and Garland to play with Pettersson then, which then do you want to do that? And all of a sudden you're not as deep on the third line. So it'll be interesting.
It will be interesting. Lots of questions heading into camp. One from the listener here. This one from, was it VinXD? I don't know, who was it? Someone brought it up. Oh yeah, KJ. How does Shorty call the play with them both on the ice? That'll be interesting. I don't know if he'll tip his hand because he often doesn't, but I did just text John Shorthouse just to see. I did just text the man himself and say, how do you plan on calling Elias Pettersson on the ice at the same time? We'll see if he gives an answer. We'll see, but the text has been sent. Okay, Harm, did you have anything else that you wanted to get to before we close it out and get to our Bet365 bet of the day?
No, I think that's it.
All right, it's going to be a lot of fun, man. Training camp is going to be a lot of fun. But it's time now for our Bet365 bet of the day, brought to you by our friends over at Bet365. Bryce Miller. We're going with Bryce Miller. Do you know who Bryce Miller is? Yes, you do.
Nope.
6+ strikeouts. Yep, Mariners pitcher. 6+ strikeouts tonight at plus 110 odds. That is our bet of the day, brought to you by Bet365, a proud partner of Canucks Conversation. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets, whatever the sport, whatever the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365. Be sure to use code VANBONUS when you sign up for an account. I did get a response from Shorty. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to share it. But it has to do with the pronunciation. Apparently the names aren't pronounced the same. So we'll see. We'll see. I'm not going to divulge more than that, but I thought it was the same pronunciation. So we'll see. We'll see what ends up happening. I would love it if little Elias Pettersson got to camp. I'd like that. Maybe.
Are you really going to call him little Elias Pettersson?
Lil Petey. That's what they could call him.
Guy's built like a truck. You're going to call him little Elias Pettersson?
I'm looking up, holding my arm up to interview him. No, the younger Elias Pettersson, the defenseman. I would love it if the Canucks just sat him down and were like, hey, look, man, you're going to have to become Elias Pettersson. We're going to have to change it. Just, you can't also be Elias. It's not going to work.
But everyone outside of Vancouver still calls number 40 Elias Pettersson anyway. So it's just going to confuse it even more.
Well, the broadcast team will at least have it down.
Yes, they will. I think Sakaris and Price looked at it earlier in the week, and apparently the defenseman Elias Pettersson's middle name is Nils. So you either get 2 Elias Petterssons or you get 3 Nils on the team if you go by Nils. So
3 Nils.
There's no easy solution here.
Why do I know Elias Pettersson, Big Petey? His middle name's like Lars, isn't it? Isn't it something like that?
I don't know for sure.
Okay, because my question was going to be if his middle name is also Nils, because that would be really funny if they had the exact same full name.
No, I don't think so.
Oh, okay. Some interesting here. Number 40, Elias Pettersson. Elias is his middle name. He goes by his middle name. His first name is Frederick.
Oh, that's right. I did
Frederick
know that.
Elias Pettersson.
Yes. Why did I think it was Lars? Is that his dad's name? Now I'm just guessing. No, I'm just guessing.
I got to scroll down on Wikipedia, but I don't see anything here. So,
anyways, okay. Well, yeah, interesting. All right. Well, we'll wrap it up there. For my co-host Harman Dial and our technical producer Jacob Lazar, my name is Dave Wardrelli. We'll see you next week, folks. We'll see you on Wednesday. Thank you so much for listening to an episode of the Canucks Conversation. Canucks Conversation is live Monday through Friday, every weekday at 2 p.m. over on the Canucks Army YouTube channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, and interact in the YouTube live chat every day with us, folks.